Hey guys, welcome to the third installment of Interviews with Age Adders. And today I have with me Luke Truman, who has reached fluency in Cantonese and is currently learning Spanish. So, you want to introduce yourself, Luke?
Yeah, thanks. I'm really happy to be on the show. I mean, the channel, I guess. You have a bunch of really awesome content, so I'm super happy to be
Thanks.
on. Um, so yeah, I was learning Cantonese pretty hardcore for about 2 years. And in that 2 years, I got to, I'd say, like a pretty fluent level. Not native level. I would not call myself native level, but I'd say I reached a fluent level to the point where I can integrate into a group of native speakers and enjoy conversations. I went traveling around China and Guangzhou, and like to put it in perspective, my host there from Guangzhou was like, "Oh, do you want to go see a film?" And I could understand everything in the film fine, apart from the bits that were in Mandarin, which was kind of sucky, but I didn't understand them. But like the Cantonese was fine. And I got my reading to a pretty good level. I'd say I read about 11 books total. Six of them were comic books, and five of them were like books. So, I've got a pretty high level in Cantonese, and yeah, like I mean, I'm quite a busy guy as well. Like I have friends and girlfriend and family, and like I work a full time job. So like I'm interested to try and see like how you can learn a language efficiently and enjoyably without like having to give up your life. So yeah.
Cool, cool. And you have a YouTube channel and website too, right? Where you talk about your ideas and share your
Yeah,
experience, right?
yeah, and if I can help one person, then that makes me pretty happy. So
Cool, cool. Yeah. So there'll be links to Luke's channel and website in the description. So definitely go check that out. So yeah, when Luke contacted me a few weeks ago, and I checked out his channel, I was really excited to talk to him because he has a little bit different of a perspective than what I normally share on this channel. But when we really got talking, got to know each other a little bit, of course, all the fundamentals of our language learning philosophy are all the same. And so it really was insightful to get to weed out what does matter and what is surface level details. And hopefully we can explore that more today.
cool.
Cool. So
Yeah,
yeah,
let's do it.
so I'm curious, how did you first get into Cantonese? Because that's kind of a rare language to learn as a Westerner.
Yeah. So when I was at Newcastle University, which is like up north of England. Um. So yeah, I was president of the table tennis society. So I was like running the club. I was running the club, and I had like a lot of friends from Hong Kong and China. Uh, and then one of the girls in the club later became my girlfriend. Um, so we started dating for a while, and got to the point when she was like, "Yeah, no, I want you to meet my friends." Took me out, and
And she was from Hong Kong.
yeah, she's from Hong Kong. She's from Hong Kong. So then, like, I'd go out for dinner with her and her friends, but they're all native Cantonese speakers, so it kind of feel like it's them, and then like there's me, like all the way over, like over here. So I kind of it was the first time, I kind of realized the boundaries or like the obstacles that you can only get so far with just English, and like that there's this whole other kind of world out there, like cultures to explore and stuff that like just being a monolingual British person, I cannot get the same experiences. So the original reason I wanted to learn was actually to just to kind of join in the conversations and be able to like join and have fun when I went out for friends for meals and that. But I was doing my masters at the time, so I didn't really have much. I just didn't really think about it until after I graduated uni, and then I moved to a little place called Grimsby, and I started learning pretty well. I started learning then. It wasn't so serious to start off with, but then it kind of one thing led to another, and then yeah, it just kind of picked up over time, I guess.
Cool, cool. So up until that point, you never really had a particular interest in Asian culture or language learning or anything?
No, I remember I met a housemates for the first time, and I don't know if I should say this, but one of my housemates was like, "Oh yeah, no, one of my friends' boyfriend learned Cantonese for their girlfriend." I was like, "Oh fuck, that sounds like so much effort. No, I can't be fucked with that." Yeah, and then I did it, so I guess I ate my own words.
That's pretty interesting.
Uh,
So when you first started, what did you have in mind in terms of goals? Were you just like, it'd be cool if I could say a few words or
See, this is when you'd probably think I kind of started with a clear goal. I kind of just kind of started without really thinking about it too much. I found a random app which was just some dislocated words. Like it gave like the Yuk Ping, which is like the pinyin of the Cantonese. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was like, what the fuck are all these numbers next to the words for? You know, like I realize now that like to match like in Cantonese you have tone, so it's like the letters is how you say it, and then the tone, the number is the tone, right? But I was just like, why the fuck does that one say 6 ounces? I'll just ignore the numbers. It's not probably not that important. And so I started like with a few apps and then stopped after like a week. So I was like, oh, this isn't really doing anything. And then later I remember Googling how to learn, and I kept on coming across this website over and over and over again, CantoneseClass101.com. And I was like, oh, well, this must be the way to learn Cantonese.
Wait, is that like the equivalent of JapanesePod101.com for Cantonese?
It's the exact same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the exact same. I was like, yes, I've found it. This is the epitome of language learning. This is like the shit. Like, but then luckily at the same time, I also stumbled across a blog post on how to actually learn Cantonese with CantoneseClass101.com, and it's by my now good friend Ollie Richards from I Will Teach You a Language. And he gave really super useful advice, which was ignore the podcasts, spend your time listening and reading to the dialogues over and over again. Ignore all that English just rambling and just forget about it. Just spend your time listening and reading to the dialogues, and then don't spend too long with the absolute beginner. You know, you want to move on, go to intermediate after like a week because the dialogues are too short, and then you want to keep on making sure you're moving on and actually spending time with the language. So I had a few days when I was listening to the podcast and I was like, well, this is pretty shitty because I listened to a podcast and then pretty much by the time it's over, like by the time it's finished, I was like, cool, yeah, I learned something. And then I tried to think of one word and I can't think of anything. So it's like, it's kind of like the illusion of learning without actually learning anything. It's quite hard to explain. But then when I made the switch to focusing on dialogues, that was a huge help. Yeah.
Cool. And so how did that kind of evolve into your more comprehensive, dedicated approach to learning Cantonese?
Yes, so originally I was just trying to find any sort of consistent time a day that I could study. So originally I was trying to do it after work, and I was because this was just when I was starting work. I just graduated from uni. I was just starting work as a process engineer, so I was pretty tired after work. I was like, but I don't want to get up in the morning, so I'll just try when I get back from work, maybe a quarter of an hour. Wasn't really making any progress, so I thought, you know what, fuck it. If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna actually try and but if I'm going to spend my time with this thing, I might as well make some progress. So I started off, I kind of carved out, I think it wasn't an hour originally. I think it was really half an hour. So for like the first month, and this is when I consider I started learning Cantonese, I carved out half an hour in the morning to kind of like, that was like my focus time. That was like my non-negotiable, like throw my phone in the toilet, just get away from it. And that was my listen and read to Cantonese dialogues. And that was like non-negotiable every single day. And then after a few weeks, I was like, oh shit, I'm actually like that thing I listened to before. I think I actually know it now, and like I'm starting to like get a feel of the language and like recognizing the sounds and getting a feel of what the tones are and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, okay. So and then that was kind of when I kind of started to think, I can actually learn this if I put some time into it. So then half an hour turned into an hour.
And I'm wondering though, so. That sounds actually like really impressive that you were able to just decide, okay, starting tomorrow, I'm going to spend a half an hour every morning, non-negotiable, and then take that to an hour. Like, was it hard to install that habit? I feel like a lot of people have tried to set up routines like that in the morning, but have really struggled with it.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I actually probably missed out quite an important bit. So I said originally it was a after work, and I did originally set up the half an hour after work, and then I came across a bunch of websites that were like speak, speak from day one. You become fluent in like a week if you just speak all the time. That's all you need to do. So I was like, okay, cool. So I went on italki.com and went to book a lesson, but because of the time difference, the only time teachers were available was in the morning. So I started getting up to try and jump on italki, and then I was like, oh, well, it's easier for me to get up at the same time every day, so I might as well just get up that time on the other days and just spend it then. So it was because of italki, basically. And then...
I see.
I kind of didn't actually do italki that much for a while, because I was like, oh, I can't really understand or say anything, so I kind of So then italki subsided, but like the kind of time in the morning kind of stayed there. So I guess it's a bit of a roundabout way to get to it, but it got there eventually. Yeah.
That's cool though. And then I'm assuming once you had it, you kept made sure to keep on, not let that go.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason getting up in the morning's hard is because you're not used to it. Like, if you get up, I mean, if I get up at like 6:30 every single day, it's no longer hard because it's just like, and even now, because I've been doing it for a few years, even with Spanish now, so like get up at 6:30 most days. I tried to have a lie-in this morning on a Sunday, and I got up at like 10 to 8 just because my body clock's like, or I guess good, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, whatever you're used to.
And then from then, I kind of had my hour of focus time, and I was starting to make some real progress. And I'd heard a lot of people talk about Anki, so I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. SRS, it makes a lot of sense. So what I ended up doing was taking the phrases that I thought were like most important and being very, very selective about it, and adding that to my flashcards.
So these were what you were finding with the Cantonese Pod 101 dialogues?
It was Cantonese 101, and it was also a Teach Yourself Cantonese. Like those two like beginners sort of courses. So I'll be taking like sentences from that and kind of using that in like to kind of do flashcards. And it's kind of like, it's not I'm gonna go all out, but it was kind of like just if I have 5 minutes when I'm waiting for the bus or doing a shit, and I can just get my flashcards out, and it's just like quite sporadic throughout the day. Whenever I had 5 minutes, I just open my flashcards and do a few reps. For me, that is a lot. I'm a lot more likely to do it that way, I think, than just if I sit down like now is flashcard time, I do like nothing. Yeah.
Cool. And so, yeah, how did your Cantonese continue to evolve from there? Like, when did you kind of discover the input hypothesis and remembering the Hanzi and stuff?
Okay, so probably before the input hypothesis and remembering the Hanzi, I have to rewind a little bit. So I continued that up with an hour every morning for about, say, a month. At which point I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I want to try and like learn a bit more about Hong Kong and like what I'm getting myself into. So I started watching loads of dramas, but like I was like, I don't want to watch it without English subs because like I won't understand anything. I'll just watch it with English subs. That's fine. And then after like 3 months about that point, my friend Ollie, who I mentioned before from Our Teachable Language, released a product called Cantonese Conversations. So this was designed for learners, but like, so based on Teach Yourself and Cantonese Class 101, I was like building up a bit of a basic vocabulary, but if someone spoke fast, I wouldn't have a clue what they were saying. So I was like, okay, well, when my friend Ollie released his product, I was super excited because this was like really natural conversations, like just recorded and then transcribed. So like say it was like, oh, you and your friend speak about the cultural differences between Hong Kong and the UK, click record, and then I'll transcribe the whole thing. So this is like, it's designed for learners, but it's really like organic and natural, which is like really, really cool. And I think that's something that was missing in Cantonese up to that point. And this was after about the third month in, there were about 3 minutes of length. So I switched to that, like the same sort of like lots of repetition, intensive listening and reading. And then after a while, like it was so hard, like I couldn't understand a word. I think I printed off the pages and I was like underlining the words with my pen. Every one I didn't know, and like no joke, the first one was like probably every other word was underlined. Like,
and these are like 3-minute dialogues.
Yeah, like 3 minute dialogues.
So like, how many days would it take you to work your way through a full one of these dialogues?
So I'd typically go through like 1 minute of the dialogue a day, and then on day 4 I'd go through like the dialogue as like a whole thing. So it'd be about 4 days. And I continued that up for a while, and then I noticed myself starting to understand more of like, in linguistics we call it connected speech. So the way words like smash together and jumble up. I started to notice the way they kind of fit together in a more fast, more natural paced speech because of this. So I was
and
like,
were you listening to these conversations throughout the day as well in the background?
Yeah, I was driving to work at this point, so I had about it was maybe about 20 minutes to and back from work every day. I just download it on my phone and just plug it into the car stereo and just had it on loop when I was driving. But I'm not concentrating too hard because I didn't want to crash. So that's pretty important as well.
Definitely.
And that was a point about a month after starting on that, as I was kind of like, okay, cool. I'm gonna actually try and start by that point, I'd probably watched maybe like 4 or 5 Hong Kong dramas with English subs, and I was like, okay, I think now is probably a good time to try and watch some of them without English subtitles and see how much I could understand. Um, so I watched just one drama, Sing Za Ying Hung, which is Fist Within Four Walls is the English name, and it's like all about kung fu. It's really, really action heavy. So like, I didn't understand probably most of it, but like, I was still having quite an entertaining time because I could just like watch people fight and like all of the important bits of the storyline I already knew because I'd already watched it with English subs. So this was kind of just like going over it again. And then once I'd watched those kind of like 5 dramas that I'd already seen, I was like, oh, what do I watch now? Other dramas are too difficult. So then I kind of watched about 700 episodes of One Piece in a Cantonese.
So it's pretty interesting to hear that in a way, a lot of what you're doing is kind of resembling AJAT in a way, because I mean, besides that, in my mind, of an AJATer would have one period in the morning where they have, they spend some intensive time with the SRS. At least that's my style. Maybe that wasn't necessarily what Katsumoto intended, but it sounds like instead you're spending really intensive time doing, I mean, something that's kind of similar because you're just working very closely with, one dialogue, and so you're intensively dissecting the language, and then you're kind of immersing passively throughout the day. You're like repeating it, and then you're also watching these dramas, and you eventually decided to kick the subtitles. And so, like, what? That's actually, when you put it all together, that's like a lot of time and effort that you're putting towards Cantonese. So, like, did you have any other like kind of inspirations to get more serious about it, or were there any other like language gurus that you were like modeling yourself after?
Sure. So I did find the AJAT website, but that wasn't until maybe the 9 or 10 month mark. So like my friend Ollie helped me out quite a lot, and in particularly, I think one of the main people that inspired me to kind of pick up my input was Steve Kaufman. I think someone probably fair to say we both respect quite a lot. And his videos were super insightful. He's kind of, I think I spent one day at work, kind of not much on in the afternoon. I kind of probably shouldn't be saying this online, but I literally watched maybe like or listened to 5 or 6 videos in the afternoon when I should have been kind of doing one of my assignments. Kind of just like brainwashing myself, kind of just like, input, listening and reading, keep going, immersion, you will get there, slow, gradual process, all of the Steve Kaufman classics, and just
awesome.
Kind of brainwash myself into doing it. And then, so that was, I think, the one thing. But the other thing is, and if anyone's looking to get into language learning, I don't think you have to start off like, I'm not doing it tomorrow, but tomorrow I'm waking up, I'm going to AJAP. Because for me, it wasn't like that. Like, it was a kind of transition to that. And the more experience I got and the better I got, the more inspired I was to do even more. So what started with half an hour, when that half an hour bears fruit, I want to do an hour. When that hour gets even better results, then I want to like start immersing myself and finding out more about the culture. So kind of like a snowball effect. So like it starts off with like this little thing, and then it just kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and just picks up momentum.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because there is the possibility that if you try to do too much from the beginning, you're just overwhelmed and you end up crashing before you've seen any results, and the whole thing kind of breaks down. So I can see that I mean, it'd be hard to really give this to someone as a curriculum, but that is something to think about. If you're having trouble really just jumping in, maybe start small, because it really is seeing your own progress that inspires you to do more, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's looking at this and thinking AJAT's a bit expensive, I'd advise carve out half an hour every day as like dedicated listening and reading time. And then after like a month, if you're comfortable with that, up it to an hour. And then like if you've got that hour of focused like study time, as I like to call it in the morning now, then you can make a lot of progress with that. And then if you're a busy person but you tend to watch an hour of TV a day, just swapping that from English to like Japanese or whatever, then you're gonna get the reinforcement of that. I study something in the morning, I see it in a TV show at the nighttime, and that kind of complements each other. So as I've kind of got more experience, I've kind of like evolved the philosophy, so to speak, and kind of like the method. But when I first started, it's important to know I didn't really know what I was doing, so a lot of it was just kind of going off advice I saw off just the person with the most views on their website.
Yeah, but I mean that is another pretty important lesson to learn as well, that as long as you don't quit and you keep going and you're ambitious, you're always, keeping your eyes open, your ears open, you'll eventually figure this stuff out. You'll definitely arrive at the right conclusion, whatever your path is to get there.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, like, I think, yeah, like you said, the main thing is, so, like, I took a lot from Ollie. I took a lot from Steve. I took a lot from AJAT, especially after I started learning kanji or hanzi. And yeah, like I didn't anyone I listen to, I don't take everything on board. I kind of like take some bits from the others, but the main thing for me is that like it's not 100% about efficiency. And I think me and Matt talked about this quite a bit before. Like such a big part that I probably neglect to talk about on my channel as well is like the psychology part, because in essence, if you don't stop, the beautiful thing about language learning is you cannot fail. Like if you keep on going, it's physically impossible to fail. So like that's by far the most important thing, and just try and like enjoy the process.
Yeah, and so if what you're currently doing is not working for you and you hate it and you're gonna stop doing it, then whatever you do that stops you from quitting altogether is better than the alternative. So it's like you can't be talking about efficiency all day if it's not actually realistic for you, if you're hating it and it's not doable.
Sure, sure. One quotes I liked, can't remember who it's by. I think it was Anthony Lowley. He said, "Do whatever you do today to make sure you keep on doing it tomorrow." Something like that, which is quite, yeah, it's kind of resonated quite a lot with me. But I think it is important, like going forward, my methodology probably as it's evolved and I've kind of learned more about the process has become more in line with AJAT. But like for me, I still keep that SRS and Anki as kind of like that icing on the cake. You know, it's the kind of stuff the really kind of a few words I want to do, and I do it kind of like sporadically throughout the day. But I think the main thing is like I have my immersion, and then I have that like more focused time that I use as a crutch to understand my immersion. So where Matt might use Anki, I'd use listening and reading many times over to a short dialogue, and then kind of go on to the next dialogue and the next thing and the next thing. And when I first start out, it's a lot of repetition and very short. But the better I get, that kind of more focused time kind of leans itself more and more towards just extensive reading. So towards the end, and I kind of did like an hour before work and an hour after work towards the end of it. And none of that was spent listening and reading to dialogues. That was purely just reading books. In like the later half, in like the last half year, it was just purely reading. And it kind
Cool.
of,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah. Let's go back to that. Your experience learning Cantonese. So, like, what did So you said that it doesn't sound like you were focusing too much on reading at the beginning. So, like, what was the how did your philosophy and your practices like continue to evolve when from that point when you first started to like drop the subtitles and stuff?
So yeah, I dropped the subtitles, and then I guess I continued that. So I also found with Cantonese conversations, and I found there was another book that my friend picked up from Hong Kong called Living Cantonese, and it's a book I'd highly recommend. It's split into 10 chapters, something like that, and it's built around dialogues. But the thing is, it's not just like any old dialogues. The dialogues are extracts from radio dramas from Hong Kong radio, like quite old, quite cheesy, but they're pretty funny, and it's like pretty real spoken because it's based off like radio dramas. So I used that in Cantonese conversations for about 6 months, and I started speaking a lot online because like I didn't think I was particularly going to get to like some super fluent level. You know, I just wanted to kind of have and enjoy simple conversations with my friends. So I started jumping on italki as well. So going to the time when I was coming off subtitles, I was doing an hour every morning, Anki throughout the day, and about 3 1-hour italki sessions a week. And then like whatever TV time I had was just, you know, Cantonese TV. And I keep that up for a while. And one of the best arguments I have for speaking early is when I got to about the 6th month mark, and this is something I remember quite vividly. I was like, okay, to my teacher before we start, okay, today I want to speak no English. Like, you don't speak a word of English. I won't speak a word of English. And we just like stayed there for the whole hour. Like, I was paraphrasing quite a lot. She was paraphrasing all sorts of stuff. Like, I think like a rabbit came up, and I was just like, oh yeah, it's like what a fox eats or something like that. Or like I was trying to remember the word for grandma, and I was like, oh, it's my mum's mum. And, like, you know, all sorts of like paraphrasing. She was like typing words in the box. But, like, I struggled through it, and then at the end of that hour, the kind of sense of actually communicating with someone and getting that real experience of human connection was like, it really gave me the strong, like, unparalleled sense of motivation that I've yet to experience like from anything else. And it's kind of like that. This is real, and I can actually do it. And it's, for me, that was incredibly motivating. And I really doubt that I would have got as far as I did if I didn't have that motivation from speaking early. Um, Now I know the process better. I am happy to wait on speaking and go with like more efficient methods, but like I don't think I would have even got on that position in the first place if I wasn't speaking. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, and so far that's pretty much the most convincing argument that I think there is for early output is for that psychological factor. Because just like we were talking about before, you need to do whatever it takes to make yourself enjoy the process and have and actually keep going. Because if you quit, all is lost. And if speaking with native speakers and actually communicating, I think for a lot of people will be extremely motivating. And so if that's what it takes, then by all means, kind of do that. But it sounds like you're not really saying that you think speaking early on helped you learn, like in a more fundamental sense, outside of the motivational factors.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I might have fucked up my tones a little bit at the start. I've got lots of stories when I tried to output and it went horrifically wrong. So like, I went to say we have a lot of Indian people in the UK, especially from the city I'm from, Birmingham. So like, always loved Indian food. And I was speaking to my friend and I was like, oh yeah, no, my favorite food is Indian food. So in Cantonese, that's, oh, did you try yam do choy? But I didn't say that. I said, so yam do is India, but I said yam do. So instead of saying that, I said, oh, you're drinking chai, yam do choy. And that literally translates to like, my favorite food is vagina. Like, just like, literally like burst out laughing. It was super embarrassing at the time. But like, now I remember both of those words like really clearly, which I think is quite a nice show of like how emotion you can link to a memory. Because like, if you have that sort of real life experience and connection with the words, you're probably not going to forget it even without SRS. If I don't see it for 2 years, I probably won't forget it.
True. Well, there definitely is always that benefit, but
in terms of just efficiency, so I'm going to compare Cantonese to my experience learning Spanish, which is kind of like you can't make direct comparisons for obvious reasons, right? But I did 3 months of very intensive age out sort of input with Spanish, and I had my first conversation last week. And I spoke for half an hour, fine, and communicated in my first lesson. Like my grammar was atrocious, and my pronunciation probably was quite bad. But I could have a half an hour conversation on my very first time speaking Spanish. So like that kind of cements in my head that input is the most important thing. And when I was learning Cantonese, like even though I was speaking quite regularly early on, what I felt was like the driver, like the engine of my progress was that hour of focus time in the morning, and then anything I can do on top, like that Anki or just chilling watching TV shows, is kind of just like gravy on top. Like it just like adds extra to it, you know.
Yeah, and so that hour in the morning, you're talking about very intentional input, right? Very intentional, like intensive time spent analyzing and getting input, like engaging as much as possible with that input.
So I'd take some data that was typically very, very hard, that maybe if I listened to it the first time, I'd only understand like 50%. And then I'd listen and read a lot. And then by the end of that hour, I'd understand 100% of that 3 minutes. Not of everything, just of that 3 minutes. But then I kind of think that gives me like a... And because it was real Cantonese I was working with, and that gave me quite a big sense of motivation. Like, oh shit, like, they had a full speed conversation, and I understood it. Like, I mean, taking away the fact that I just spent an hour studying specifically that, it's kind of like that. It helped me have a very sort of tangible sense of progress, you know, which I think was quite cool.
Yeah. I definitely think like whenever you understand something real like that, that is definitely extremely motivating, and it really gives you that sense of, oh, this is possible. I can extend this out to the rest of the language.
Yeah.
Cool. So then after going past the 6 month mark in your experience learning Cantonese, how did things continue to evolve for you?
So from 6 to 9 months, it was pretty much the same, apart from my kind of I stumbled across AJAT around that time, and then I was like, I'm just, you know, throwing everything English out the window and just like trying to immerse as much as I can. Then I started to make a lot more.
It sounds
progress.
like you had enough kind of your own experience by that point to realize that when you read the AJAT website, like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense, like total immersion.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I'm not sure if I was a beginner, but like, oh, well, what's the point? I don't understand anything. But like, I was getting to the point when like there was like most stuff was going over my head, but it was at least understanding just about enough to like keep it enjoyable. And if you look back on my channel, you can probably find about the time I discovered AJAC because there's a video of me speaking really shitty Cantonese saying all Cantonese all the time. Like this was about 8 months of learning. I just booked a flight ticket to Hong Kong to go visit my girlfriend and her family there. And like I was like super pumped, I was super excited, and I was like, okay, like I think this was about after about 8 months, and I was like, all right, this fucking month before Hong Kong, I'm just like screw English. I'm not gonna speak any I'm not gonna listen to any English apart from, work and not ignoring my mum. And then like when I went to Hong Kong, I challenged myself to like not speak any English for 2 weeks when I was there. So only been learning for about 9 months at the time, but like I just about, with my girlfriend being extremely patient with me, I just about managed to survive for 2 weeks without any English.
Awesome.
And that was like a really super big boost for me, and like my spoken level probably went like up quite a bit. And that was the point when I'd finished the kind of Cantonese learners material that was not artificial, so like living Cantonese and Cantonese conversations. Looking out at the other stuff out there, not being able to read Chinese characters, there's just nothing. So I started HiSeek about that time here. After
I was just curious, what was your thoughts about the characters up until that point? Were you eventually planning to get to them, or?
I was kind of thinking, I mean, they look kind of cool. I just want to be able to speak. I don't really care about reading. And then when I got to that 9 month stage, it became blatantly obvious that being illiterate in a language is absolutely crippling. And that is kind of like, either I pack up, move to Hong Kong and spend my whole life there, or if I want to learn it from England, I have to learn how to read. Because if I can't read, then there's learners content and there's TV. And there's no way to bridge the gap. Like, it's impossible. Like, not impossible, but like it'd be very, very painful. So like, kind of hit a glass ceiling with a way that like I could have kind of basic-ish conversations, but I could not improve much past that because there's just not enough stuff out there with Cantonese, so it kind of, I just said I wanted to be able to speak to an okay level, and then when I got to the point when I could have like a variety of simple conversations, I didn't realize ahead of time how restricting that would feel, because like I've seen people have videos like this on YouTube. I'm like, oh man, that's cool. If I was that good, I'd be happy. But when you are that good, I'm like, I mean, this is still like this. There's still like so much stuff I can't do. I want to be better than this. This feels so like limited.
And it's kind of like when you're crippled, you see people walking, and you're like, oh man, it would be so cool if I could walk. But once you can walk, then you're like, well, look at all these people running. I'm so slow.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it's like if I was first learning Cantonese, I was like a crippled guy, and then when I learned how to walk, it's like Usain Bolt comes running past. I'm like, oh shit, like I want that. Yeah, that's when I decided to learn characters, and this was when I was started to read more of the AJAC website, and also at a similar time, my friend Ollie uploaded a 3-month Chinese character project using the HiSeek method. So I was like, okay, this is two people who seem to be giving pretty good advice, both using this book, so I'll just give it a shot. And when I started HiSeek and learned more about Chinese characters, they're so cool. Like, especially I was learning the traditional ones because it was like most stuff was from Hong Kong, and like you start to appreciate like the extended history and like all the way that, because I just thought there were a bunch of disconnected pictures, but then when you realize that like they're all like they all connect to each other in different ways, and they're all made of like the same like 200 to 250 basic components, and they're just kind of like all combining themselves in different ways. So it is kind of like there's a lot of structure there, and it's like there's really the way it all fits together. I kind of found absolutely fascinating at the time of doing HiSeek, and before I was just completely oblivious and didn't care for it. So that kind of like opened my eyes, so to speak. Yeah.
And so, were you using Anki with remembering the Hanzi?
Yeah. So my method I used to approach it was I'd do my mnemonics and then I'd create a flashcard in Anki. So I'd have my ping and English on side 1, and the character and the HiSeek number on side 2. The reason I included the ping was because I'd have stuff that I'd have similar keywords, like ocean versus sea.
Yeah.
And if I know the words, I knew both what those words are speaking anyway. So if I add the Yuping, I'm like, oh, well, that's that one and that's that one. So because I added the Yuping on there, then that kind of like gives me a bit of a context with at least some of the characters. So like when I saw the character for Open, which was like HOI1 for the Yupingon, I was like, okay, well, I can see that means open, but then I know that I can use it in Hoisam means happy, to open your heart. Hoisi is to start, and it's the same character, so you can like, okay, it means open, but looking at the Yuping, I can kind of like see the connections to how it works with actual words.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was quite actually helpful, having that base of listening comprehension to an extent before I started learning the characters.
Yeah, that makes total sense because what I used to recommend for learning Japanese is to, get the Heisig book. First thing, you don't know a word of Japanese, and then you put the keywords on the front and you have the characters on the back. But like you said, because there's so many keywords that are very similar to each other, and a single English word is such a tenuous link, people would really struggle with it. And then I realized, in my experience, I actually didn't do that. I didn't do RTK, remembering the kanji properly, until I already had a foundation in Japanese, and then it wasn't so bad. And so that's why now I say that you should just do a really quick and dirty run through for the kanji so that you learn how to see them. Then once you do have a foundation, then you can go back and do them properly with the character on the back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think without knowing kanji or kanji, there's a certain amount of immersion and progress you can make without knowing the characters whatsoever. So like getting that ground without it, and then kind of getting up to that level when I can at least stand a chance of understanding stuff, and then doing it after that kind of puts everything in more context. But if I waited much longer than 9 months, it would have just got worse and worse and harder to improve without knowing characters. So that's why I started about then.
Yeah, but it's really cool to hear that you kind of had a similar experience with me, actually, with the characters, where you didn't learn them properly until you already had some kind of foundation, and that does definitely help.
Oh, I didn't touch them until I got to 9 months mark. I didn't even But the weird thing was, I didn't touch the characters there. I hadn't really paid much attention to them. I'd kind of seen them about from time to time just because I was watching dramas and sometimes they had the Chinese subtitles on the bottom, or I had the Yuping and the characters were above it. So some of the most characters, like the character for you, character for I, the one that means I can't remember what the Heisig word was, but it's like a measure word in Chinese. If I want one of something, it's one, that measure word, and then a thing. You know?
Yeah.
And it's the one that kind of looks like the kind of cave. I can't really. Yeah, so those ones that are really common, I didn't actually need a mnemonic. I kind of just saw the stroke order, and I was like, oh, so that's the stroke orders that make that character, and then that kind of just stuck like that for the few that were so common, like the IU and stuff like that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense that would happen because you just get exposed to them so much, you start to recognize them just like you recognize people's faces. It's like you see it, you know what it looks like. You don't even really look at all the strokes. So
yeah, kind of just like a picture, but then you kind of when someone tells you what the strokes are, I'm like, oh, that does make sense actually. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So then, what was your? Oh, by the way, just curious, how long did it take you to get through all 3,000 of the characters with remembering the?
Oh no, I only went through book 1.
Okay, so that's 1,500.
Yeah, 1,500, and that took me 3 months.
Cool. Cool.
But I was immersing at the time as well quite a lot. So the thing with this is I had it in my head that I hadn't used Anki to this extent before. So I was like, okay, I'll do 20 characters on day 1, 20 characters on day 2, and on day 3 I'll do 10 to kind of catch up with reviews a bit. And then if I do that for 3 months, I'd go through 1,500 characters. But Anki doesn't really work like that in the way that you do. If you add half the amount of cards for one day, it doesn't really die down much. So if I was to redo that again for the same deadline, I'd probably add 20 characters a day every day for about a month and a half, and then just take a week off without adding any new cards and just try and focus on the most difficult ones that aren't sticking, to try and let the reps creep down. Because when I got to about the 1,000 mark in Heisig, I was ahead of where I was supposed to be. And I had a professional exam to take at work, which was called the National Examination Board of Safety and Health, which is quite important for engineering because it's one of the stuff we do is quite dangerous, and health and safety is really important. So I took that, and I basically had to take a week of really intensive study for my professional exam. So my afternoons after work was pretty much blacked out, but I still woke up before work every day to do all my reps and make sure that was out the way and kind of reconsolidate some of the information. So I think my reps went down from about 200 to about 140 in that 1 week, just from not adding anything new. So if I did it again, what I'd do is like 20 a day and then like a week off, then 20 a day for like another month or something. You know?
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Due to the way that Anki's like algorithm tends to pile up reviews.
Yeah.
Cool. So then after learning how to the characters, how did your learning change?
So I found a intermediate reader in Cantonese called Wedding Bells, which is basically about the story was quite interesting. It's split into 20 chapters about this Japanese guy who moves to Hong Kong and falls in love with this Hong Kong woman, and it's kind of like the development of their romance, and it's basically split into 20 chapters written from the perspective of the woman, the Hong Kong woman. So that was quite interesting for like learners material. So I started off with that, and I kind of was getting more exposure from the Agent website at this point, so I started sentence mining. So I took my kind of focused hour in the morning as reading and listening to the same dialogue or uh, chapter of the book over and over again. But then I'd mine sentences from that to use like in my Yankee. But then because it was a paper-based book, it was very, very time consuming actually creating all the cards and stuff like that. It must have taken me like an hour a day just making the cards. So anyway, I did
How
that
many cards
for
were
like,
you trying to make a day?
I wasn't really had a specific target for cards per day, just like whatever sentences I thought were cool from the page I was reading, I just took them.
How much
And
was
if
that usually?
6 to 8, maybe
Okay.
ish, probably around 8 on average. Yeah. So I'd carried on that for a bit, and then I'd finished that book, which was called Wedding Bells, and started moving on to more authentic content. So I picked up a copy of The Little Prince in Hong Kong, which is like the only book ever to be translated into Cantonese. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, this is like supporting Cantonese culture. This is like, like supporting the language and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy this. I'm gonna read it. And the Little Prince chapters are very short. So when I read a chapter, I typically understand maybe like 80% of it on my first read in terms of like words, right? But that 20%, most of the detail was just like over my head. So I started sentence mining with that. And then after about 3 or 4 weeks, and I was also sentence mining from my italki tutor, and I was writing a diary in Chinese at the time and getting my diary corrected on a website called Lang8, and then taking the corrected sentences and making flashcards out of them. So I was doing a bit of a combination between italki, like I had like literally a hand diary written out in Chinese, and like these books, and I was getting sentences from all sorts of them. And after about 2 to 3 months of this, I was about almost finished with maybe halfway through Little Prince because I kind of picked it up and put it down a few times. I got to about 1,000 sentences, and I remember thinking one day, I just realized suddenly I spent about an hour and a half making flashcards, maybe like an hour repping flashcards, and only about half an hour of actually reading. So like I was like, this is just fucked up. This is like back to front, you know. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to make any cards. I found a website called Hong Kong Golden, which is like a Reddit for Hong Kong. And they have a storytelling channel where they put lots of like fiction books on there. And I found this thriller book split into like maybe 40 something chapters, but each chapter was quite short. So okay, I'm just gonna like use an app called Pleco, which is like one of those online dictionary things. You like press it with your thumb and it comes up. And I'm just gonna like read for 2 hours a day. Just read this book and like read the same chapter maybe 2 or 3 times and then go on to the next chapter and just kind of do it that way. And this is when I really found my reading ability in Chinese improve. But I think the thing to take into account here is I'd already got 1,000 sentences under my belt, so I already had that kind of like 80%. So whatever I was struggling with was like that last 20% of like the specific words to that topic. So like because I was reading over the course of a whole book, the like topic specific words had a lot of repetition in. Like it was a thriller book, so like the words like murder, kill, run, like gun, stuff just came over and over again. So like you get a lot of repetition over the course of a book. So when I started reading more and stopped making cards, that's when I think my speaking and my reading took off. Yeah.
So if you could go back, would you have started that process earlier, or do you think that balance of first going intensive and then switching over to extensive worked well for you?
I think the balance worked well. The one thing I would change is I spent my time trying to sentence mine paperback books, which is a bitch. So I'd have just read ebooks and copied and pasted to make flashcards, and I could have done it the same amount of flashcards in like half an hour instead of an hour and a half.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That was like the thing that was frustrating the most. And I guess as well, like Cantonese is fairly limited with resources. So, like I couldn't just mine it from TV subtitles because there's this spoken written divide. Most books are written in standard written Chinese, so if I mind sentence of that and spoke like that, people would go, "Oh, well, that's weird. We don't speak like that." So like, there's quite like a finite number of resources I had. So yeah, that's what led me to Hong Kong Golden. So yeah, that was pretty useful. Yeah, just lots of reading, maybe about 2 hours a day of reading, plus maybe 2 hours a day of general immersion, and I just did that for like maybe 6-7 months and spoke a lot, and eventually got quite good.
Cool. So was that kind of what your second year looked like, of just that extensive reading, extensive listening? Things got easier and easier.
Basically, yeah. Every now and again, I will kind of like got caught in a trap, like, oh, I can just make a few cards, and then the next week I'm like, no, fuck Anki, this is bullshit, and then just kind of throw it in the bin again.
Yeah.
But like,
I've been there.
I never stopped doing my reps. When I stopped Anki, I just stopped making new cards, and then as soon as I started to pile up again, I was just like, this is just shit, so I'm just going to stop making new cards. So
that's noble. Most people wouldn't do that. Most people would just delete their deck.
I mean, I kind of realized the problem that wasn't that Anki was bad; it was that too much Anki was bad. So when my reps got down to like below 100 per day, I was like, well, this is much more manageable, and I can just do it like in 5 minutes here and there throughout the day. Across the day, you maybe get half an hour, and that's enough to do like 100 reps. So that was about a good balance for me. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So then, what was tell me a little bit more about your experience in that second year, like eventually reaching that level where you could call yourself fluent.
Right. So the big defining moment for me, which is where my comprehension was like, shit, I just watched a film and understood everything in that film, and that was like a really big moment for me, is because I couldn't mine sentences directly from Hong Kong dramas. I kind of felt like there was always a bit of a disconnect between my focus time and my immersion, and the more you can line these up, the better results I think you're going to get. So my friend recommended me from Hong Kong. There's this book called Men Can't Be Poor, and it revolves around stockbrokers in Hong Kong who make their living buying and trading stocks, and it's all about typical sort of like everyday strifes of a Hong Kong person. Like stressy jobs, family life, relationship troubles, that sort of thing. So I started reading this book, and then about 2 or 3 chapters in, I realized this book has a film based off the book. So I was like, oh, sick, that's pretty cool. And then I was like, right, I finished the book in about a month, and by the time I'd read the book, I sit back and I watch the film. And because the film is in essence just a distilled version of what was in the book, like in way less detail, I was like, oh, well, I read about this in like twice as much detail, so this is really easy to understand now. So like that kind of reading and then watching the movie kind of really elevated my listening skills to the next level. And then after that, I felt that like my immersion in terms of like what I could understand from Hong Kong dramas, I was enjoying more. So I probably went up from maybe to like, it was probably about 2 episodes to 3 episodes a drama per day, plus like that reading in the morning. And like with my listening to the next level, I really felt like I was making much more out of my immersion. Because I don't know if you found this, like when you get really good at one thing, it kind of has like domino effect and kind of just goes off into other areas of your language.
Yeah, it's like there's a kind of a core, and once you really have a strong core, then you can figure out other new domains of language pretty quickly.
And once I had that core, the Cantonese, the slangy, the everyday colloquial words were under my belt. The ones that I didn't know were usually the same in standard written Chinese and Cantonese. So it would be words like, I was watching a drama, and it'd say like something like gorilla, like as in guerrilla warfare, that gorilla, not like a monkey. And because that's like quite a formal word, like normally with Cantonese and standard written Chinese, the more formal and academic you go, and specific and technical, then the bigger the overlap. So once you have that kind of colloquial, general grammar kind of structure in your head, whatever the overlap was, I could look up words using the standard written Chinese subtitles, and it was the same as in Cantonese. So I started doing that. I mean, normally I didn't look up more than like one or two words per episode because I just wanted to like just keep listening. But it helped that I could actually like hear the words, and by that point as well, even without the subtitles, I could hear the words, type in the ping into my phone, and get what the word was at that point. So that was like
cool.
I could actually just like use my listening to get more words, even if I didn't know what it meant.
So it's like the better you get, the easier it is to get even better. So it definitely sounds like you kind of reached that critical point, critical mass.
It's kind of like, okay, I'm not sure if I'd quite word it exactly the same way. So like, the better you are, the easier it is to learn more words. But then learning new words also has less value. So it's kind of like this weird. I don't know quite how to explain it properly, but like I can learn more words easier, but if I learn one word before, I see it everywhere.
True.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that is an interesting kind of trade-off that happens. That almost cancel each other out. But I mean, overall, there's diminishing returns when it comes to language learning. But it still is satisfying to really realize that you can pick up stuff left and right. And I think there's some period where you are picking up stuff left and right, and it is pretty useful stuff. But I
think for me that was about the 1.5 year mark. For a few months then, it's kind of like I was like hearing stuff and then speaking about it with someone that day, and and I at that point I could talk about quite a variety of topics, but it was nagging me that I really wanted to talk about language learning in Cantonese, and I wanted to learn more about the history of Hong Kong and be able to talk about that a little bit in Cantonese. And no matter how much immersion I got, I wasn't seeming to solve that problem because I didn't have stuff to really listen to about those topics. So that's when I hired translators. I wrote articles in English myself or got articles online in English, hired a translator, and then hired a native speaker to record audio for it. So then I had articles to read and listen to about stuff that I was actually passionate about, I wanted to speak about. So I'd listen and read to, say, articles about Stephen Krashen or connected speech, and then I'd speak to my tutor about what I was just reading and listening to. And that was like, that was pretty cool.
That's super interesting because that's something that I never would have thought about learning Japanese, because luckily there's so many resources for it. So it's kind of one of the interesting challenges of learning a language with less resources.
I guess the good thing about starting up a website is you can make most of the money back selling it to other people. So
it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's like you're a pioneer. So that is really cool. So I also want to hear a little bit about what was going on like subjectively for you during this period of, really fast growth for you. Like what was your way of thinking about Cantonese? Did you have a more clear goal at this point? Like, how was it affecting the other portions of your life? How are you balancing it with the rest of your life?
So the way I saw about learning in general is that hour in the morning was non-negotiable, and that was every single day. But everything else in my life, life gets in the way. So as long as I've done my hour in the morning, I don't necessarily have to feel bad about going out to the pub or going to a bar and having a few drinks with my friends. So like, as long as I've had my hour in the morning, get back from work, watch an episode of a TV drama, I didn't feel bad about going and having a drink with my mates, because like, I think sometimes stepping away from the process can kind of help give you a clearer perspective on things, and kind of help, because if I just went 100% all the time with no breaks, I would have probably gone clinically insane and just either I'd have given up or I'd have been in a mental hospital right now. So
cool. Well, that sounds like a really cool balance, though, having that non-negotiable 1 hour and then being a little bit more flexible. Although most days, of course, you were at probably immersing when you got back from work, right?
Yeah. So I mean, basically, what it was is, I forgot to say, when I was in Bristol most of the time, I on this Hong Kong Reddit version, I posted one of my videos speaking with this guy from Chile in Cantonese, and some guy messaged me like, "Hey, dude, I live in Bristol too." So there was a good point for about half a year where my friends were Cantonese. So it was kind of like I was taking a break from TV, just still speak Cantonese with my friends. So that was like not so much,
cool,
but
cool.
like that was normally during the week. So I'd have my hour every morning. I'd watch TV and immerse in the afternoon. After work. If I went out with my friends, typically once a week to go out for food and just chat, and then maybe on the weekend I'd go out on a Saturday night with my friends from uni and just speak English. So like, as long as I had like, I think the best way I can describe it is have that non-negotiable hour, and then any time I would spend normally watching TV, I watch TV in Cantonese. It's not deliberately trying to watch more TV than I would normally. It's just kind of replacing what I do already with just the Cantonese version.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go about it. And so, like, did your friends know that you were spending so much of your life in Cantonese? Like, what was the perception of the people around you?
Yeah, one of my friends was like, I said I was learning Cantonese, and then my first reaction from my friend was like, "Oh, I learned Chinese at school. It was Welsh shit. Why the fuck would you want to do that?" My girlfriend was always super supportive, and most of my friends were like, "Oh shit, that's pretty cool. Like I'm just getting drunk every night. That's pretty cool. How you like got a pretty goal that you're passionate about and you're shooting towards." So like most people were pretty like supportive about it. And then because on my channel I have videos of me speaking, because I was a very most of the websites I stumbled across first were very output heavy early on. So I thought, well, this is the way to learn a language. So that's what I did. And you can see videos of me speaking Cantonese right from like 3 months on my YouTube channel, like really, really badly. And I uploaded a video after about 6 months, and this was my conversation with my tutor when I had like an hour with no English. And there was a ton of mistakes in there. Like my Cantonese is pretty bad in that hour, but I had all my friends from school commenting like, "Whoa, dude, you're so fluent in Cantonese," and I'm just there like, "You have no fucking idea. It is pretty shitty right now." Like, but I'm just there like, "Yeah, man, I learned fluent Chinese in 6 months. I'm what?"
Yep. That's funny.
In reality, it was quite far from that.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But that's cool. So then, coming up to around 2 years, what was there kind of a point where you became satisfied with your level? And like, what do you think about your current level now? Like, what can you do? What still can you not do? Like,
Okay, so I learned for about 2 years overall. Um, I would sound fluent, but I'd say I'm very far from native level. You know, if maybe you take 0 as a baby and 100 as a native Cantonese speaker, I'd maybe say about 70, 65 to 70. So like most TV dramas and films, I can pretty comfortably follow and enjoy it and get pretty much most of what's said. Maybe not 100%, but like 90 plus. You know, maybe like 95% of. If it's like something romance based, I can understand like everything, or like something simple, I can understand everything. So I can understand most of films and TV dramas. If I pick up a book, I can understand normally most of it, but there's always one or two characters per page that I don't know. So I typically just look them up on my phone and keep reading. But the main reason I got satisfied with it is because from that year and a half to 2 years, I was in a social group I was living in Bristol at the time with my friends. So if Luke and Kim are watching this, then you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for helping me. But I was hanging out with them, and we were like hanging out in Cantonese and communicating generally fine. And the time I realized that I was actually quite good was when I normally spoke with one of my tutors, Elaine, and I only started taking lessons with her quite late. And she was like, "Oh, Luke, I need to speak to you about something really important." And this was like outside the lesson because we became quite good friends. And I was under the impression like, okay, this is a serious topic. We'd want to speak in English. And she was just like, "Oh, 刚好 Luke, 我要讲下啦." And I was just like, what? We're using Cantonese for this? Oh, fuck, let's do it. Like, go on then. And then
that's
like,
awesome.
And then like, I think at first I said a sentence in English, and she was like, "No, Luke, don't speak English. That's just too weird." And I'm just like, that's the first time it's happened that way around for me before. Normally it's like, no, I can't speak Chinese to someone with a white face. So like that was the first time someone was like, "No, Luke, I can't speak English with you. It's just too weird." And I'm just there like, cool.
Yeah,
I guess
that's awesome.
we can function. That's pretty cool. But I have a long way to go still. Like I said, like I say I'm fluent, but like there's still a lot of gaps I need to plug. And
Like what kind of
especially if okay, so mostly if I say watch something super political, I can kind of recognize and I can okay, that's a Chinese name, that's someone else's name, that's someone else's name, but I don't know who the fuck they are, so it just goes over my head, if that makes sense. Like, so I kind of recognize really loosely what they're talking about. I know that there's a load of names in there, but I don't know who they are or what they are. But for me, I think it's like what Kaz said. You know, you get what you want to get good at, do those things. And I spent no time trying to understand the news or trying to understand politics because I have like literally zero interest in it. So like I'm perfectly capable to understand, not be able to talk about those things. So to put this into perspective, my girlfriend was at the table with me and my friends when we were speaking, and she broke out into English to explain it to me, and I was like, I still don't have a fucking clue what you're talking about. So
Yeah, that
that's
is
fun.
some experience I've had is that I started to hold myself to such a high standard with Japanese where I was like I should be able to understand everything, and then I would not understand something. I go find the English equivalent, and I still wouldn't be able to understand it. And then I was like, oh wait, maybe I have kind of funny expectations. What?
But yeah,
But so
I
do
mean,
you
I think if
still
it was the
like?
English equivalent, if it was the English equivalent about English politicians, I probably would be able to follow it. But it's because I'm not familiar enough with the politics and the people in Hong Kong. I think was mainly the main reason why I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, and so do you still want to go and kind of search out those gaps and close the gaps or try to improve your accent or anything or like overall what do you how do you see Cantonese what role do you see Cantonese playing in the next like 10 or 20 years of your life?
Um, yeah. So me and my girlfriend have been dating for about 4.5 years now. It's pretty serious, and like her family have been like super nice to me. Her mom's an English teacher actually, but she's never spoke English to me just because she's like really hell bent on helping me. Um, and I think for me at the moment, I have a lot of emotional ties and like relationships in Cantonese that I'm at the moment, even though I've started Spanish, like every now and again, a YouTuber comes on that because I've collaborated with a few Hong Kong YouTubers and made videos in Cantonese with them before. So like a YouTuber comes on that I'm kind of friends with, like, oh, I'll watch their video, why not? Actually, this morning a YouTuber came on saying top 5 apps to learn Japanese, and I was like, oh god, this is quite interesting. So I kind of watch videos of that every now and again. There's certain relationships that I've built that I think are going to carry on in Cantonese. Um, but apart from that, I mean, I'm pretty happy with my level, but I do at some point want to go back and have that, bring the intensity back to the process and kind of have that more dedicated time because I feel like without that, this is kind of more in maintenance mode
Hmm.
as opposed to like I'm making progress. So in the future, for sure, I want to go back and improve my Cantonese. So in terms of future ambitions in my life, I think in terms of like life goals, I'd have it like 5 languages I want to speak, and one of them is English. So Spanish and Cantonese, you can probably guess if you follow my channel. And I think you already know the other one's Mandarin, and the final one's Japanese actually. So
Cool.
I'm under the impression that over the next 20 years, I should be able to speak all of them relatively fluently over the next, say, 20 years or so. Um, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I might forget one and have to refresh it, and then I can focus on this one. And it's going to take a long time to kind of get multiple languages to a decent level. But I've got to a stage now when I really enjoy the process, and like this is my passion now, and like even if it takes me 20 years, that's fine because like it's going to be a hell of a 20 years, and I'm really looking forward to like discovering more about Cantonese and Mandarin and Spanish and other languages as well. So yeah, I'm really
Yeah,
looking forward to it.
that sounds really awesome. So you're kind of thinking about taking the polyglot type approach of like really intense focus on one language at a time, letting the other ones maybe fall a little bit, but then going back and bringing them up to higher than they were before.
Yeah. So for me, it's always a question of time because it's kind of like the higher you speak a language, the more useful it is. But the higher you speak a language, the harder it is to improve. So it's kind of like,
That's it
okay,
right there.
if I get my Cantonese better, if I spend another year in my Cantonese, I could improve it. It could be even more useful. But if I spend that year on Spanish, I could be pretty fluent in Spanish. So it's kind of like, what's the
Yeah,
trade-off?
that's the
Um,
dilemma I'm always struggling with.
so I don't want to be someone who picks up languages for the sake of it. Um, every kind of the 4 I mentioned there before, I'm not including English, obviously. I have I have pretty big personal reasons to me of why I'd want to learn all of those things, and like whether it's a personal interest or just personal connections with friends or whatnot. Like I have pretty solid reasons to learn all of them, so like I wouldn't go much past that because I don't want to distill it too much, and I actually want to learn to a decent level. I don't want to be someone who speaks 20 languages mediocrely. Wait, mediocre. How do you say that?
Mediocre?
Like mediocre, something like that. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, it's always that balance of breadth versus depth. So that's
so
cool. Well, I want to ask a little bit about how your experience of learning Spanish has been different, but we also don't have too much time. You want to just give a quick summary of what that's been like?
the main difference for me has been availability of resources. So, and I'm at the moment I'm kind of doing like a 6 month experiment with Spanish, because there's a lot of stuff I wanted to read that I couldn't get my hands on in Cantonese, and I couldn't justify myself reading a book when I had too much Cantonese to learn. So examples of that was The Linguist by Steve Kaufman. I've read that in Spanish already, which is super good. Available for free in Japanese with full audio and links. So I guess I'll send Matt a link so we can put it in his description, because that's
Yeah.
a free Japanese book about language learning. What more do you want? And the other book was Sapiens, which I'm super interested in. I'm really enjoying that right now. And there's a few other things as well. So like after 3 months of learning Spanish, I can understand more than 50% of TV. If I'm reading and reading something slowly, I can understand, especially if it's a scientific subject with a lot of cognates from Latin, I can understand almost all of it. Like, whereas with Spanish, the more academic the subject, the easier it is. With Cantonese, the more academic, the harder it is. So it's like the complete opposite. Because like molecules is some like weird shit I've never learned to say in Cantonese, but in Spanish, molecules is like I can't remember the exact word. It's basically the exact same fucking word. So like, you know, it's kind of weird. Like I embraced myself for the struggle, and I'm waiting for the struggle to happen. So like, like my Spanish is super basic, but like everything seems to be happening a lot more organically and a lot more naturally compared to with Cantonese. Whereas with Cantonese, I feel like I needed a lot of structure and rigidity. I kind of feel like just from day one, just reading a lot and a general immersion, you can get pretty fluent after like a year. Without
And you think
really
that's just because
strategy.
because it's so close to English and you have good resources? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, resources as well. I mean, it's a combination of both. Yeah.
I think that's the thing is that when you learn an Asian language first, that calibrates your expectations. You think that's normal. Then you learn a European language, you're like, "Whoa, this is a joke." But you start learning European languages, you learn, French and Italian, you try to learn Japanese, and you're like, "Oh man, this shit's fucked." So
yeah. So like my friend says, my friend Ollie was like, "Oh shit!" Like, so he learned a bunch of languages, did varying degrees of success. I think he lived in Japan for a few years, and he was saying that for him, Cantonese was one of the hardest purely because of the limited resources and stuff. So like, and he was like, "Dude, you're starting with Cantonese. Like, I can't even imagine what that's like." And I'm just like, it's like what you said. I'm just like, I just assumed that learning any language was like this, and then kind of now I'm realizing maybe it's not like that. Maybe it's not supposed to be that hard.
yeah, I think I had the same thing with Japanese of like, I mean, I haven't really learned another language, but for me, people ask like, was Japanese hard to learn? I was like, well, I have nothing to compare it to. For me, it just is what it is. But then I talked to other people who learn European languages,
Like
and
Lucas.
yeah, and then they makes me realize, especially because I think the thing is that with people who have more traditional, what I would call very inefficient methods, the reason why those still are so
effective is because it's opposed to language to English.
Yeah, it's like they get enough results even though the methods are bad that it doesn't really become an issue. Whereas with Japanese, you're really not going to get anywhere unless you have efficient methods because it's so difficult. And that's why it's the Japanese community that has AJAT and all these crazy SRS tools and things like that, I think.
Yeah, and I kind of feel that like, I mean, we talked a lot about the trade-off between efficiency and fun. So say if we say AJAT's 100, and then my method say, I don't know, call it 8%. I don't even know if it's more or less efficient. I've not really done AJAT properly, so I don't know. But say if it takes 2 years for AJAT, then it take me 2.5 years. But if you've got this grammar heavy focus thing that's 10%, I don't want to spend 20 years to learn Japanese to a decent level. Like, you need something more than that.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Yeah, well, it was awesome to get to talk to you today. It was really great to hear your like different perspective, but agree on so much stuff. And I know you have a lot of other content on your channel that, especially about learning your experience learning Spanish and stuff. So people should definitely go check that out if they're interested.
Yeah. On my website as well. I mean, I have a lot of Cantonese specific content on there. So if anyone's learning Cantonese, on my website, I actually have like these are my top book recommendations for Cantonese because I know it's harder to find. A lot of them are available free online that I wish someone told me before. So I've got more Cantonese specific content in Spanish, but like I'm getting some Spanish stuff out there as well. So.
Awesome. Yeah. So those links will definitely be in the description. So yeah, any last things you wanted to say, Luke?
Yeah, language learning is like Pokemon.
Yeah, there you go. So, oh yeah, so also me and Luke did another video that's going to be on Luke's channel of us talking about different topics about language learning. If you really want to get the joke, then you have to go check that out. So,
all right, cheers, Matt.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Luke. Hey guys, welcome to the 8th installment of Interviews with Age-Adders. And today I have with me Luke, who I just learned about a few weeks ago, and I'm super. Oh, this is so hard. Fuck. Okay.